Hey everybody, what is up? It's Dr. Vibe, host of the Good Men Project show, saying you're blessed, highly favored, and a magnet for miracles. And we are very happy to have you watching this either live or on replay. Really appreciate it. Hosting the Good Men Project show, the conversations that no one else is having when it comes to manhood. And we have another special guest coming up this month. It's Michael Russer. He began a personal transformation back in September 2011 that included diagnosis of prostate cancer, radical prostatectomy. I hope I said that right. Following up,
Well, sort of.
no, sort of, work with
Yeah, it's close enough. Yeah.
good stuff. Follow up in active radiation treatments and full-blown impotence. While most people would call it a tragedy, he considers resulting impotence to be one of the biggest blessings in his life. It is because of his impotence that he and his partner discovered an entirely new approach in experiencing levels of emotional and physical intimacy that far exceeds anything either experienced prior to when things were working, quote, normally, unquote. So we're very happy to have Michael on our show tonight. Welcome, Michael. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Dr. Vibe. It's a pleasure being here with you, and I'm looking forward to this very much so.
Well, I'm looking forward to learning and also more importantly have the members or the fans or the viewers of the Good Men Project show and the Good Men Project learn, grow, and change in a positive direction with what you're going to share with us tonight. So why don't you share a little bit of background about yourself from those Rochester days?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I was originally hailed from Rochester, New York, and on June 19th, 1970, at 6:45 in the morning, literally 24 hours before I was to walk down the aisle to pick up my high school diploma, I hopped on my motorcycle and saluted my dad and said, "Send me out the diploma when it arrives." And 4.5 days later, I was out in Santa Barbara, California, and never looked back.
Now, what did your dad have to say about that? Like, that's quite the radical decision. Like, that's quite the statement to your father, a young man, to your dad at that age.
Well, he knew I was going, and by that time, I was the seventh. I was the seventh sibling to leave. So I was and my other siblings, the next oldest was 6 years older. So I was like the oldest of the second family almost. There was no second family, but it almost seemed like it. And by that time, they were so exhausted that it's just go, do whatever you need to do. I think he was probably.
He wasn't kicking you out of the house. Did he want you that badly to leave, or he just?
No. It's just like you do what you. He knew I was going to go. I mean, I've been planning it for almost a year, and I just, I didn't see any benefit of walking down the aisle. I didn't have a lot of friends in high school, and I was just so ready to go and start my own adventure. So I did that, and I still remember coming up Ventura Freeway. There's the ocean, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm here. I can't believe it. And the night before, I saw my very first live palm tree at the edge of the Mojave Desert, and I just stood there and stared at it, thinking, wow. So it was a great adventure for an 18-year-old, and it's a good thing I made it when I did, because my bike almost didn't make it. It started falling apart by the time I got out there.
Wow. So, what was your life like for a number of years in California? I know pre-show you said that you had a very successful career in speaking and business.
Well, yeah, I ended up in my early to mid-20s. I became an entrepreneur and never stopped. I was pretty much a serial entrepreneur. I started a lot of different kind of companies. Most of them pretty successful. And then in let's see, 1995, I chose to become a speaker. And I declared I was going to become an international speaker about technology, and specifically about the internet. And within short order, I did become that. I became the leading speaker in the real estate industry worldwide about the internet. In fact, I own the U.S. registered trademark, Mr. Internet,
Wow.
for many years, until I sold it a couple of years ago. Almost 3 years now. Yeah. So I had all that, and then. I got married, had a couple of kids, and about halfway through the marriage, my wife and I pretty much realized we weren't going to stick together, but we decided to stay together until our youngest son went off to college. And that was right around September of 2011. And I had been anticipating the big shift in my life. In fact, my daughter had just graduated. She's the oldest one. Had just graduated from Syracuse University. Now that's a story in itself. She was born and raised in Santa Barbara, and where did she decide to go to school? Syracuse. I said, you do realize it is snowy, it is cold, and by the way, did I say it was snowy? Yes. I mean, this is like where I came from, and I don't think you have any idea, but hey, knock yourself out. Well, anyway, at her graduation, if you had seen my photo at her graduation, you'd think you'd be looking at my dad. That's how worn out and burnt out and just dead inside I was. And I knew it. I knew it was happening. And so I had this thing called Life 3.0. I was ready for another shift in my life. And in September 2011, I pulled the trigger on that. I pulled it hard and fast. I call it the proverbial line in the sand of my life. I was a very driven and kind of shut down guy. You'd be surprised how many speakers, very successful speakers, are actually very shut down people. It's easy to really use the platform as a way to protect yourself from being vulnerable. So I chose to, when I stepped over that line, I insisted that my heart be open, vulnerable, and most importantly, willing to feel everything, especially all those things that I avoided feeling my entire life. And then I ended my marriage, where the last 11 years of that marriage, we were effectively roommates. I lost all the friends associated with that marriage, and I deliberately walked away from a very lucrative career that fed my bank account, but not my soul. So I then walked into the abyss of not knowing what was next. I mean, no, you think about that, you literally take that next step and say, I don't know what's next for me. And I was going to be turning 60 in just a few months at that time. So it was a big deal, very big deal. Well, what came next was just 2 months later was a diagnosis of prostate cancer. And as we were talking off air, in my family, the big C means you're going to die, and you're going to die badly. None of them went easily. I lost 5 other members of my immediate family to various forms of cancer. And what's so interesting, Dr. Vibe, is that when the biopsy came back, they said, "Oh, doesn't look bad. It's kind of a mild case. You got months to think about it." I said, "I thought about it. Take it out now, right now." And I just knew. Well, they arranged for that, and sure enough, it came back as extremely aggressive. And if I hadn't made that decision, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. It's as simple as that.
There's so much. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
Forgive me, because there's a few reasons. First of all, thank you for sharing so much. There's so much we want to get to, but also we have Damien. Can you hear us?
Yes. G'day.
Good evening. Good evening. You sound. Where are you calling us from?
Australia.
Wonderful.
Oh yeah.
Broome, Australia.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's Wednesday morning.
Yes.
Wednesday morning. Whereabouts in Australia?
Sorry, Thursday morning. Wednesday. Wednesday morning. In a place called Broome, Western Australia.
Okay.
Is where I'm at. It's in there's a beach, famous beach here called Cable Beach.
Right.
I'm in the top left-hand side of Australia. So it's a small town of about 14,000 people. It's remote in that I work in Indigenous suicide prevention. We have the highest Indigenous suicide rate in the world where I live.
Wow.
So,
well, thank you for
nice meeting you guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, David.
Yeah,
no worries.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I don't know how much you caught of what Michael was sharing with some of his story, but I'm going to start off the first conversation piece. Michael, you were a very successful businessman.
Yes.
How did you handle challenges in your? It sounded your business life was challenging because it sounded like you were a very shut down guy. Plus, your marital situation was not going that well.
No, not going well at all. And I take full responsibility for that. I just threw myself into my work, and that's another way to shut down. Anything to distract ourselves from feeling anything, right? And so I just said, that's it. I've had enough. And the marriage was just like 10% of it. What I was saying I had enough of was not so much the marriage, but the way I was experiencing life. Just had enough. And so I had no idea what was going to come next. All I knew is that I had to do something. And otherwise, I just wasn't going to make it. And it turned out to be actually true. If I had stayed in that situation, chances are I wouldn't have had the presence of mind or even the care to take care of myself the way I did, and with respect to the cancer. And I probably would have perished, actually. And so it's, yeah, that was a big deal. And then December, they arranged for the surgery, and they took it out. They did a great job, except they didn't get it all. When they did the tissue studies, they found out it was very aggressive. And I technically still have the cancer, and I've picked up another one since then. But I'm very pragmatic about that, actually. I'm very pragmatic about this whole thing. If you talk to anybody who has cancer and they've come to terms with it, they will tell you almost invariably that there's a gift in there. And the gift is that you really get clear about what it means to be in the moment, to appreciate everything that happens right now in the moment, even the stuff that doesn't feel so good.
That's really really fantastic to hear. My father-in-law has just been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he's in Canada, and he's having to move to Edmonton to get radiation. So it's quite nice to hear those words that there's a light there, and I'm a big believer that when there are life's challenges, there's always a light. You just got to turn it on.
Yes. Yeah. What I like to say is that within every challenge that life throws our way is the seeds of a far greater possibility. Now, I have to tell you though, Damien, as if the cancer wasn't enough. As a result of all my treatments, and I don't mean to say this to freak you out or your father-in-law out, but statistically, this
you went bald.
I went bald. Yeah, that happened. No, that happened. No, that happened before the cancer. Oh, that's good. Anyway. I lost all my hair. Wait a minute, Dr. Vibe did too. So it's
me. So.
You too. All right, there we go. Let's see it. All right, cool. Okay, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, as a result of all the treatments, I was rendered. I basically had most men's worst nightmare. I was rendered clinically impotent, and this is a topic that is not talked about today, and there's so much shame around it, and it's unnecessary. But I have to tell you, I rallied against it for a long time, and you remember the last 11 years of my marriage, I was faithful to a sexless marriage, and so now I'm legally and morally able to have relations with another woman, and I can't get it up to save my life, and I got to go. You got to be effing kidding me. I mean, really? I mean, like what? I mean, I actually shouted to the heavens about this. I go, you got to be, and I was angry. And you go through these stages of loss, because it is a loss. You go through disbelief, then anger, and then the third stage is where most men get stuck. They usually get stuck in depression, and they don't move from it. And it's so unfortunate and so debilitating. I instead went to negotiation, somehow thinking, well, there's got to be a solution here somewhere. Well, it turns out there wasn't. But that ended up being an even bigger gift because I met the woman who's to become the love of my life a year later. And I had to have a brutally candid conversation with her. I knew I had to let her know that about my condition. And, when you're having that kind of conversation, the first thing you're thinking about. Now, remember, by this time, I had not been intimate with a woman in 12 years.
Can I just
And
can I
yeah,
just
go ahead.
how did you and your wife, before you went your separate ways, how did you two handle those 11 years? Because I think that's absolutely a phenomenal story in itself.
Yeah, well, again, what we did, and I think I see this in a lot of other couples, especially the baby boomer generation, you bury yourself in something, some distraction. My distraction was work. Her distraction was the kids.
Yeah.
And I had to earn a living. I had to put those kids through private school, send them to college, the whole thing. And she, did the nurturing and the whole thing. And so yeah, you bury yourself, which is not healthy. Um,
Right.
and I sometimes wonder if that's one of the reasons I got the cancer. But with my family history, who knows? Um, but that's how a lot of couples do it. They bury themselves. And it was so interesting because we decided to stay together for the sake of the kids, which is a common refrain.
Sure.
But in retrospect, I don't think I would do that again, because
Why
the
not?
kids because you end up teaching the kids how not to be intimate,
Mm,
and they
that's
pick it up. Trust
Yeah, I
me,
was going to
they
say,
pick it up.
kids pick it up. Yeah.
They may not be able to articulate what they're experiencing, but they sense. And my wife and I rarely fought. We were very cordial to each other and even loving in some ways, but they could tell the warmth was not there. And so we basically modeled how not to have a relationship. And so, anyway, so we waited. And then once my son went off to, actually he went off to his second year at college, because the first year that I would have done it, my wife's mother became a hospice patient, which we took in because she had Alzheimer's. And I wasn't about to pull the trigger on her on that. She needed all the support she could get. So, it's not like we hated each other, not at all. We still love each other even now, but not just in that way. And so it was the second year that he went off to college. But boy, when I pulled that trigger, everybody's head spun. Even though she knew it was going to happen, and when I pulled it hard and fast. And it's the only way I knew how to do it, because otherwise I would have caved. Honest with you, I would have caved.
Sorry,
Let-
can I ask how?
Go
Can I
ahead,
ask the
Tim.
question? Yeah, sorry. How?
Yeah.
How did you pull the trigger? Like, what was?
Yeah, that's actually
good friend of
another
mine.
whole story. Yeah.
Yeah, a good friend of mine. Her husband of 18 months has left her, and they both work on the mines together here in WA. They weren't working together, but they work on the same site. They've been having some troubles, and they were going to talk about it when they got back into the city where they live, which is Perth, Western Australia. And they agreed on that. She woke up the next day and he had already left and sent her an email. That was his way. So working in men's health, I understand how depression is and how sometimes pulling the trigger can be quite selfish. So that's why I'm kind of interested, because how do you? I've never broken up with anybody because I've only ever been in one relationship. So yeah, that's why I'm sort of kind of curious in regards to that, because I can appreciate that that may have to be selfish sometimes, the way in which you do it, because you're protecting you.
Well, yeah, it was also. It was also, I mean, I literally felt I was dying. And one of the things you missed in the early part of the thing is that if you had seen a picture of me at my daughter's graduation at Syracuse University just 6 months prior, you'd be thinking you'd be looking at my dad. I mean, that was the difference in the way I looked. So I felt like I was dying inside. But as to how I did it, that's actually another whole story. I actually ran into a life coach whose primary focus was living from the heart. Everybody else I coached with or had therapy with was, it's all a bunch of talk, and it didn't go anywhere. But she cut right to the chase. She says, your heart's not open. It's as simple as that. And I had to agree with her. It wasn't open. I was terrified to open it. Because, being vulnerable means, oh my God, I'm going to start feeling things, which is exactly what I needed, but I didn't know it at the time. And so I dove in with her help, and if I didn't have her help in the first few weeks, I probably would have caved, and if that had happened, I'd be dead now. I know I would. I would have gone. I would have been very depressed and felt that I failed myself. I knew I needed to make this shift, and frankly, I think my ex-wife is happier now too, because, I mean, that's not a comfortable place to be when you're not expressing intimacy of any kind. It's not a great place to be. And so sometimes just pulling it, it's kind of like you got a hangnail, right? Well, you can take your time trying to pull it kind of gently so it doesn't hurt so much. But sometimes it's just better to rip that sucker out and get it over with.
Michael, I just want to interject, Michael. Do you remember the moment that you were told that you first have cancer, and how did you react? The reason why I want you to share this is I want other men and those who love them to hear your experience on how you first heard about it, because many men will get that news.
Yeah.
And
they were watching my PSA numbers, which is an indicator that might be a problem there, and it had jumped a little bit, and I went for the biopsy. And in my family, I knew as most of my adult life that there was a very good chance I was going to get some form of cancer. I mean, 5 other members dying of cancer of your immediate family, that's not a great track record. And so when I got it, it was like, yeah, it was a hammer blow, but at the same time, I figured, well, all right, then we just move forward. We do whatever we need to do to make the best chance of this. And it's interesting because, I became real. Let's say I really looked at my mortality in the eye at that point. And as we talked earlier, that in itself is a gift because you get to appreciate every moment. Well, many of us do get to appreciate the moment much more fully. And so that was hard. But what was harder was realizing the fact I was now impotent as a result of all the treatments, and especially after having been faithful to a sexless marriage for 11 years. That was really hard. Really, really hard. Yeah, until I met, the love of my life a year later, and then we had that conversation, and it's quite a story behind how we even got to the point where we could explore and experience extraordinary intimacy. Because once we determined that we were going to be more than friends, I had to have that conversation with her, and you wonder if the woman's just going to look at her left wrist, whether there's a watch there or not, and say, oh my, look at the time. This has been fun, so we'll talk later. Bye-bye. I'm going, oh boy. That didn't happen, fortunately. And I said, as I point down to my crotch, I'm saying, this isn't happening, and it may never happen. Are you willing to explore other ways of being intimate? Not really knowing what that meant, right? Just not knowing. Right. But what else did I have, right? That's all I had. Well, she said, being who she is, she said, of course, and she had never been with a man who experienced erectile dysfunction. So we immediately booked a room, or I immediately booked a suite at a hot spring spa north of here, and because we wanted to make our first intimate encounter to be very, very special. Right. And but I hadn't, and this part's really important, Dr. Bive, I hadn't quite given up the notion that I could perform for her in an intimate way, like most men, right? Mm-hmm. So when we arrived, I had with me the full contingent of every erectile aid money can buy. I brought the highest dose of Cialis you can buy. I brought something called Muse, which is very expensive, very powerful. In fact, if any normally functioning man was foolish enough to try this drug, they would be going to the hospital 4 hours later for relief, if you know what I mean. Right. And then there's the ever dependable but really, really unromantic vacuum pump, just in case everything else failed. Well, we show up in this room and our jaws drop, and how incredibly romantic the setting is. You know, here's this 4-poster bed about 5 feet off the ground, and fireplace, mood music, and lighting, and then of course the hot tub right off the deck. I thought I died and went to heaven, right? And my partner is extremely beautiful. I mean, she's from Brazil. She's Brazilian, and all the stereotypes of Brazilians are pretty much true. And she is gorgeous and sensuous and intelligent. Well, by this time, remember, it's been 12 years since I've ever even laid next to a woman, romantically speaking. And so to say I was excited is putting it mildly, right? And the only problem was, after 20, 30 minutes of hugging and kissing and intimacy play, it didn't show. So I said, okay, well, let's try the Muse. And it's an intraurethral suppository, and I'll let your viewers and listeners try to imagine what that is. Not very romantic, and she helped me with it, but it's very, very powerful. Well, should have kicked in about 20 minutes later. Nothing. Nothing. Well, by this time, little beads of sweat are starting to form on my brow, and I'm thinking, please, God, please don't let me down, you know, or you too, you know, just don't let me down. And so I said, okay, sweetie. I said, look, those two things didn't work, but I brought the vacuum pump. Now, this is based on physics, and if there's anything I understand, it's physics. So, you know, just bear with me. And she had never seen any of this stuff before, right? And so she has this look of, what? Are we going to have to do this every time? And so I put on the vacuum pump, and I start pumping for all I'm worth. And I start seeing some and feeling results, and I'm thinking, oh, thank God. And I pump and pump and pump, and I get so excited that all of a sudden I double over in excruciating pain. Because I sucked in my left testicle.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes. And it hurts way worse than being kicked, let me tell you. Oh, my God. And sweat was pouring down my face. And I went into despair. I literally sitting on the bed. I remember thinking, it's over. It's over before it even started. And I just stayed with that for a few moments. But then something, even at my lowest point, something profound shifted. I don't know how it happened, but it just shifted. I said, that's it. I finally surrendered to the isness of my condition. I stopped fighting it. I looked over to her laying on the bed with this look of, you know, what are we going to do next? Not my look, hers. And I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm done with all of this. Let's just lay together and see what happens. Oh, my God. That is when the heavens opened up. And we made love for hours and hours and hours. In fact, the only reason we even went to sleep is because we knew we'd be exhausted the next day. We fell asleep in each other's arms, woke up the next morning, made love for hours and hours and hours and hours. And then part of this was this flood of insights and even discoveries on why we were having this experience beyond anything either one of us had ever had before when things were working just fine in our separate previous lives. I mean, levels of such extraordinary intimacy that I never even imagined, neither one of us imagined it was even possible. And so I started thinking about this, and then it eventually became very clear what was happening. And I think I can speak for most men on this. When we get hard, let's face it, our brain goes from here to there, and it's hard to control. I mean, it's an overwhelming urge. We are wired that way for propagation of the species. Sure. And it's a genetic as well as a cultural wiring. Well, what happened is that,
yes, right.
What's that?
What's that? If you're heterosexual.
Yes, if you're heterosexual, yeah.
True.
You're wired that way for procreation if you if you're heterosexual.
Yes. Thanks for clearing that up. Yeah, we're wired for procreation,
Right.
and so so that what happened is that my inability, my impotence, my inability to get erect, essentially short-circuited that urge. I didn't have that urge. Now my libido was on fire, but I didn't have the urge to penetrate because I didn't have anything to work with, right? And so what that did is that slowed me way down and allowed me to match her emotional and sexual response profile, which for women tend to be very different than men, especially as we age, as we get older. She's postmenopausal, and it typically takes much longer for them to quote unquote warm up. Well, that gave me an opportunity to help her warm up, and the response was so far off the charts I couldn't believe it. And the other thing too is I was not able to release because I wasn't hard and I couldn't ejaculate. And after about 4 months of trying, I now can do it without any trouble at all, and it's very powerful. But then you'd think after 12 years, I'd be climbing the walls, right? And I wasn't. I wasn't at all. I received so much fulfillment and deep satisfaction in giving to her in that way that I just kept shaking my head afterwards. I says, how is any of this even possible? This is so far afield from what my normal behavior and reactions would have been in this kind of a situation when I was functioning normally. And so it just created this incredible array of insights and like I said, discoveries that on how, and again, I can only speak from heterosexual relationships because that's my context.
Right.
But when it comes to emotional intimacy and even spiritual intimacy, what I teach also will apply to any orientation, any kind of relationship. But in terms of the physical intimacy, I can only speak to the heterosexual kind. It was amazing. And the other thing too is we found that our lovemaking was generative in terms of energy instead of depletive. Typically, after intercourse, people are tired, and men especially have a tendency to fall asleep. That didn't happen because what we were doing was very generative, and so we were actually had more energy after hours of lovemaking than when we had before we started. Wow. And the other thing we discovered is that instead of the honeymoon period being the high point of one's sex life, that is not at all the case. It just keeps getting better and better and better and better. We'd never expected that to happen, but it did. And so it's amazing. And one of the things I learned is to become very, very present in the bedroom with her. And we eliminated the word performance from our vocabulary. And our lovemaking is goalless, and it's where we're very present for each other in the giving, and we're very present for each other in the receiving. And we found that to be extraordinarily powerful way of relating to each other. And that would apply to all relationships, I'm pretty sure.
I'm going to interject in there because I know we've let you share a bit. Damien, before I have some conversation pieces, but you being certainly a guest also, do you have any questions on or comments on what Michael's just shared?
No, I'm very happy just to be listening. I'm actually multitasking. I'm doing some data entry, plus I'm tweeting because it's International Men's Day here in Australia already. Oh,
yes, it is.
And so I've just tweeted that I'm doing all three things, that I'm on a Good Men Project Google Hangout, that I'm tweeting International Men's Day stuff, and doing data entry. Okay. So I'm happy just to listen. I work from home and I work remotely, so this is actually, it's good to actually have these, or be part of this conversation, even if it's just listening with other fellas talk. I mean, and just as a thing, my husband is gay, not me, so I'm going to put that out there.
Michael, I have a few conversation pieces for you in regards to when you share your story with men who are, I guess, actually two groups of men.
Yes.
Men who are experiencing or have gone through prostate cancer.
Right. Or any kind of ED, actually,
Yeah.
whether it's prostate cancer induced or not. Yeah.
And when you share with those who haven't experienced erectile dysfunction, do you get different reactions?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. In fact, I had to learn the hard way. When I first started sharing this with men, typically men who were not affected by ED, I was giddy. I was so giddy, it came off as being, pardon the pun, cocky. And I didn't intend it to be that way, but it came off that way apparently, and I actually pissed off some guys. And so since then, I've learned. And so I start out by saying, look, I have this experience. It's my personal experience. You may find some value in it, but first I want to acknowledge you for being able to do something I'll never be able to do again. And I acknowledge you for that. And if you're interested, this story, my experience might have some value for you, but that's up for you to decide. And what I recommend is if you're interested, just try it on like an overcoat, see if it fits. And if so, wonderful. If not, that's great too. So I find with men who are not impacted by erectile dysfunction, I have to become very, very humble, very almost hat in hand, because this is a sensitive subject, especially for men. And men tend to be competitive by nature, and that's the last thing I want to do is come off like, oh, well, you're some kind of special guy here. No, I'm just a regular guy. Had no idea this was going to happen, and I didn't cause it to happen. I really treat my ED as a gift. It never would have happened without that. I never would have been in a place to experience this without that. Now, talking to men with ED, that is a different conversation, because chances are very good they're going to be coming from a very deep place of shame and hurt and embarrassment, and I don't really want to talk about this. I'm done. I'm not a man anymore. I'm broken. Don't even talk to me. And so I'm as gentle as I can be with them, and explaining that there is a world of intimacy that it's a matter, how we see ourselves as men is a matter of choice. We can choose to believe the cultural imprint that you're a man based on how well your equipment works or how good you are with it, or you can choose to believe that who you are as a man depends on how deeply you choose to connect with your partner, and please her in the way that she wants to be pleased. And one is based on comparison, and the other is based on something we have actually quite a bit of control over. So I start out the conversation that way. And the other thing too is not many men are willing to talk about this, and so I'm hoping that my willingness to talk about this actually starts that conversation. In many ways, this topic is where breast cancer was 30 years ago. It is clouded in a huge amount of shame, and it's the biggest elephant in the room in our culture today. And the way you get rid of that elephant is expose it for what it is, and you talk about it. And so I'm hoping that just my talking about it and showing that there is hope. In fact, there's more than hope for all these men and women affected by it. And by the way, their partners, whether it's male or female, are just as impacted. And because they start, even though they know intellectually it's not them that's causing this lack of reaction or erection, that they can still affect them emotionally, and they start thinking, maybe it is me. Maybe he's just not interested in me anymore. And so it's and if open and vulnerable and candid conversation is not had between the couple relatively soon, it can spiral very quickly, and the spiral goes downhill, not uphill.
As you've gone through this journey and you continue to go through this journey, how do you say to men when they're going through this and or they find out they have ED, what's the best way from your experience they share it with their partners? You shared how you did it. Do you have any general thoughts on the best ways they can share this with their partner? And
Well,
and also the way the partners need to react too.
yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, it really helps if there's a strong foundation of deep connecting emotional intimacy, which I call the foundation for all other kinds of intimacy. If there's a lot of wounding already in the relationship, it's going to be very difficult, because with wounding we tend to put up protection and barriers, which means the necessary vulnerability and candor is not likely to happen. And there's bound to be way more wounding on this subject. So my first thought is, if there are some other issues within the relationship that involve wounding and hurt, that those get resolved first through the help of a licensed therapist before you really get into this. And then once that has been addressed, then they have a platform or a framework for which to share things that could be hurtful or painful, but do it in a vulnerable and compassionate way. So with men, I say, look, just be as honest and candid as you can, and reassure your partner it's not them. This is something physical going on with me, or it might even be, it could be psychologically induced. Stress can do it. They need to reassure their partner it's not you. I'm as excited as always about you. It's just that this isn't reacting that way anymore. And the partner needs to also be just as candid on how they're feeling about it. How does this make you feel as my partner? I want you to be, totally honest and candid with me. And it gives them permission to be very honest about their feelings. And there's bound to be some conflict. You got the intellectual versus the emotional. Intellectually, they know it's not them, but emotionally, there's probably some element of that feeling that way. And it's really good to get it out there. That way they can come together collaboratively and support each other in this journey that's going to move forward. Then the next part of the conversation should be, and really it's incumbent upon the partner to say, well, look, let's explore other ways we can be intimate with each other. And in fact, that happened with me. My partner, I was very blessed. My partner was very candid with me, without reservation, telling me what she liked and what she didn't like. And that's important. The other thing I found is that in a lot of long-term relationships, especially as women age, their preferences and needs for the types of intimacy that they may have been very excited to have when they were younger during childbearing years, they may not be as excited about it now. So there's this big age distinction. So a lot of women, when they're during childbearing years, their wiring will often make them prefer penetrative sex as the preferred way of having physical intimacy. As they age, women tend to look for other ways, because penetration is not necessarily the thing that they crave the most at that point. There could be many other ways, but it's incumbent upon the partner to be very candid about that, and for the man to listen, really listen and pay attention.
I heard that. I had a feeling that word would come out.
Yes, really pay attention, and honor what their partner is saying. And if they're willing to do that and then explore this as an adventure together, see what can happen. I mean, what my partner and I discovered was basically based on an adventure. Let's just see what we can do, what can happen. And oh my God, what came out of that, and what continues to. I mean, we're still on this adventure, and we've been together now for several years, and it just keeps getting better and better. I mean, we've experienced what I call spiritual intimacy, where there's this energetic exchange of sexual and life energy that happens without even touching. One time, almost put me on the floor in convulsions in a good way, and then there's men allowing their feminine side to come out, and their partner allowing the male side to come out, and what I call gender energy swapping, and that is very powerful. And there's all kinds of ways of exploring physical intimacy that are very powerful for both men and women. Unfortunately, a lot of the medical community is not up to speed on this. I had one of the top urologists in the country. He's a celebrity urologist and cancer specialist, for prostate cancer specialist. He services the celebrities. When he heard of my situation, this was his reaction. Bullshit. Can't happen. No man can have mind-blowing sex if he can't have an erection and it does not have a prostate. Can't happen. And I'm going, well, maybe not in your universe, but in mine, I've never had it so good, quite honestly. And it has actually never been this powerful for me, ever. And so the medical community is really not necessarily up to speed. And frankly, most of them are very uncomfortable about talking about this, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I think it would...
go ahead,
just to say, that sex isn't a medical thing, so I guess the medical fraternity would be uncomfortable because they can't. It's not a science. And sort of thing. So.
Unfortunately, though, it's the impact of what they do has huge on this. And the thing is it does have a medical impact, because if a man goes into depression, he is losing a bit of his will to live, and you don't want that to happen when you're fighting prostate cancer or any other kind of condition like that. So it's really important that they at least have the presence of mind to refer them to somebody who can help them through this process.
Yes.
But to go out and say, oh no, that's impossible. No, I mean, that's just, in my opinion, that's irresponsible and very close-minded. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, we're going to wind it down in the next few moments. Damien, do you have any conversation pieces you want to share before we'll let Michael go? I have one more I want to share with him, but you being from Australia, we say in the future, anything you want?
In the future, yes. I actually said that Cameron Conway, who's who's part of the Good Men Project. Yes, I tweeted to him this morning. Or last night. Yes, I'm from the future. Have a good day. So, no, I'm fine just listening. Yeah, no. I hope I get involved. I think tomorrow in Australia is the Good Men Chat online. So is on Twitter. So I sit in front of a desk all day in front of a computer. So this is just fine, just to listen. It's really good to be part of this, just to be listening, sort of thing. So yeah.
Good stuff.
It's awesome to have you, Damien.
Yeah, Michael.
No, thank you for sharing as well. It's late any fears. Sorry. Yep.
No problem, Michael. Before we let you go, I want what is with the journey that you have taken? What is your definition of intimacy?
Oh, that's a great question, because I'll ask audiences. I'll ask the men in the audience and then the women, and boy, are there gender differences to that one. Men tend to think more towards the physical side. Women tend to think more towards the emotional side. And I said, look, just so we're on the same page, I define intimacy as connection, deep, abiding connection on one of three, actually at 3 different levels. You have emotional intimacy, and that happens with an open heart and vulnerability. That's requisite. Then you have physical intimacy, which is not necessarily sex. There's a lot of sex going on out there without any intimacy, no connection. It's a release. It's a mutual release thing. I'm talking about something that it's a giving, and that's the difference in what we do. In fact, my partner and I discussed this, and we both agreed that as powerful as our receiving is, if we had to give up one or the other, we'd give up the receiving just so we could give to each other. Now that's physical intimacy. That's a real deep connection. And then there's spiritual intimacy, which is the giving, the sharing of this sexual life energy. I can't even describe it because it transcends touch. But it's connection, deep, abiding connection on any of those three levels.
Well, on that note, we'll end off another episode, monthly episode of the Good Men Project Show. Very happy to have Michael on with us, and thanks so much. And Damien.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in, joining the conversation. Do you have any final comments, Damien, you want to share with us, and then we'll let Michael have his final comments?
No, other than I can see all your books, but you probably can't see all mine. There, you can there.
Oh wow! Yeah.
What you can see at the top is all my Star Wars figures. So, anyways, yeah. No, it's been great, and I think just today coming in and hearing your story, Michael, has assisted me speak to my partner about his father and what he's going through. So it's been great. So thank you for sharing that. Because it was the conversation we had a couple of days ago where his father was fretting about the very things you were talking about. So yeah.
You know, I'm going to put something out to you. And I mean this very sincerely. If he's interested in chatting with me, I'd be happy to talk to him as one man who's already gone through this. And I'll do that pro bono. I'm happy to do that.
Wow.
Really, sincerely, I'd be happy to do that.
Oh, wow, fantastic.
That's and too. I can, even though I have not gone through this myself, my father has had prostate cancer, and even more ironic, you said that you mentioned Edmonton in Canada. I live in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
So we have something in common, but certainly Michael is the best person that's online with us right now to show that. And Michael, very much humbled that you take your time to share with Damien. And Damien, I hope you certainly take him up on that, because it's always
absolutely.
Yeah, and we'll certainly after the conversation finishes, we'll certainly exchange your contact information. That's great, Michael. Any closing words you'd like to share with us before we let you go?
Yeah, I just want to share with all the viewers and listeners that I'm nobody special. I'm just a regular guy. And what should have been my worst nightmare ended up being the biggest blessing in my life. I never would have predicted it. I never would have thought it. But it ended up being that way. And first and foremost, never, ever, ever hold back and try to, with your health. Because a lot of men avoid testing for prostate cancer, not because of the cancer so much, but because of the implications. And men die because of that. And it's so unnecessary. And I also want to share with everybody, whether you're affected by this or not, that there are entire worlds of intimacy beyond anything we can imagine. And I never would have expected it. I never knew about it. I'm just here to say that with an open heart and not thinking about performance, but thinking about presence and giving instead of receiving, goalless. I mean, it's just that is the prescription for having a relationship, deep connecting intimacy on all different levels. And I encourage people to just explore it together with your partner as an adventure. Let your hearts guide you. Let your intuition guide you. And I think you're going to be amazed at what you discover about yourselves and your partner.
Wonderful. That excellent way to close out our conversation on this month's edition of the Good Men Project Show. Michael, if people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Perhaps the best way would be to go to I've got a book coming out in 2015. The book site has all my contact information. Just go to hardlybroken.com. Hardlybroken.com. That's the title of the book, and the double or triple entendre should be apparent with that one. And
I like that. Michael has quite the wit. You didn't catch it before we came on, but he has quite the wit. So we'll just let it run through your imagination.
Yeah. Yeah, hardly broken. Well, I mean, I literally have had women contact me and say, my fiance told me to go find another man because he's broken.
Wow.
Yeah. So, that's how they can feel. And it's so unnecessary. They're not broken. They are not broken at all. And if I can do it, they certainly can.
When's your book available?
It'll be well. It's interesting you'd ask. I have the contract is supposed to be on my desk in about a week with the publisher, and they asked me to not start writing it until it is. So it's probably going to be the latter half of 2015.
Cool. No, I bookmark it, and I've got your page up now. So
yeah, but the people can get intimacy tips and all kinds of things from the site, and
I'm going to tweet it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. No, not tweet. It uses email. Email does that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to let both of you go, and listeners and viewers, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. Really powerful conversation we had tonight on the Good Men Project Show, but that's what the Good Men Project Show is all about. We're having conversations that no one else is having. I am Dr. Vi, your host of the Good Men Project Show. You can catch many of my online shows at thegoodmenproject.com. I'd like to thank Damien from Australia. Michael, thank you so much for everything that you've done and you're doing, and empowering not only men but women and also their families that love them. So it's appreciated. So we'll see you next month, everyone. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I'll email you, Michael, through your website.
Yes. All right.